Have you ever wondered what a former dominatrix knows about unlocking a man's true power? Today we sit down and speak with Geraecka Lyonns, a healer who went from walking around the Pentagon to living life on the streets to coaching men how to embrace their inner strength and inner masculinity. She was raised in a military family with a narcissistic mother. She's faced chaos and come out stronger on the side of it. Not only that, but she's now guiding men to lead with confidence and helping mothers raise fearless sons who are powerful, who are strong, who are kind, and who are loving. So today we dive into her curious, wild, insane, game-changing journey to deliver insights that you're not going to get anywhere else. So stick around and listen to discover the secrets that can transform your life, your love life, your relationships, and to all the parents out there, help you raise strong, masculine, powerful men. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Magnetic Man podcast, where we're about helping men become someone they're proud of, who attracts a woman that they're proud to be with. And I have a very special guest today that I'm excited to introduce all you to. I have Mrs. Geraecka Lyonns, and she works in the men's space. She's actually very multi-dimensional, if I can use that word. She helps moms in terms of raising their son. She's done a lot of work in the men's space, helping men tap into their dominance and leadership, and even come from a background as a former dominatrix. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I'm really excited to have you here, Jerrica. So thanks for jumping on the Magnetic Man podcast.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a joy to be here. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Awesome stuff. I know I gave you a little bit of an intro. How would you intro yourself? Because you have so many expertise in so many different areas. How would you introduce yourself?
I knew this was coming.
It's hard to put you
I'm
in a
never
box.
really prepared for this question because it can feel different at different times. You know, I come from an unorthodox place. I don't come from an academic world. I come from like a get my hands dirty, survive a bunch of things world and figure it out. So I would say first and foremost, I am a healer. And I love playing in this. This is my playground. I think it's all about overcoming whatever life throws at us. And instead of becoming hardened and bitter and limiting our perspective, it's about healing and opening ourselves up to what this is really about, and then being able to offer those same skills to the world. So that's kind of how I see myself, is I show up where I'm needed. And right now in where we're at, I feel like this is what's needed most. Yeah. And because when I originally started coaching, I was determined, I was going to be a coach for moms and blah, 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 blah. And it's funny because then I almost immediately began coaching men because that's what was needed. I had so many of my guy friends approach me and they're like, you should get paid for this. And I'm like, I think you're onto something. I think I should. And now it's just recently come full circle. And now I'm going to be coaching moms, but very differently than what I expected before. I'm going to be coaching them on raising men based on all of the juicy details and things that I have learned from men, by men, about men over the past decade. So I think my work is truly mostly about self-sovereignty and personal liberation. I think that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think you said it much better than I did. And one of the things you mentioned, and I was so excited to talk to you about this, because someone could look at your life and say it's been extremely challenging in many avenues, and we might touch on a few of those tonight. But also what I like to hear is just your attitude and how hopeful and positive you are for the future. I think a lot of men have been interacting with women and they feel like giving up, like, women, they don't appreciate men and appreciate what they do. But I'm like, no, these women do exist out there. It might not be every person, every woman that you meet, but they do exist. And I'm so keen to unpack your story, the challenges that you've had. As we've said, you've had every reason to hate men, not just from a bad breakup, but from really challenging situations. And yet you're out there on the front line trying to help men and do the best you can. So I know you're not a fan of going into your life story just for the sake of it. And yet at the same time, I feel like your life story does have a lot of learning lessons that are applicable to the conversation we're about to go in. So maybe you can kind of kick us off, because even your childhood was rather unique in terms of the background of your father, the dynamic with your mother. So you go into how many details you'd like to, but maybe just describe a little bit about your childhood growing up, what that scenario was like, and then we'll unpack it from there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep it somewhat surface level. I don't want to.
Sure, no problem.
But we'll
Yeah,
make it fun.
yeah.
So, one of the unorthodox things about my childhood is I grew up in the military, and that involves a great deal of transitions. I think I had moved about 16 times by the time I was 16. And I kind of just kept with that pattern for a while throughout my, you know, all those growing up years. One thing that I would say that I'm really fortunate about is I grew up surrounded by warriors and really strong masculine leaders of men. And my father was one of these people. And unfortunately, he wasn't around very often. But when he was very present with me. And I guess in many ways, I was my father's son. I don't think he knew how to have a daughter. So he and we did all those things. And I got to basically, when we got together, we were playing catch. We were shooting guns. We were training, we were wrestling and I was learning all the skills. We would play. He had his little soldiers from his childhood. So we'd play with his little soldiers, or we'd play like knights and Vikings. And I adored my father. I absolutely, he was my hero. And then unfortunately, I was estranged from my father because my mother, though she had many lovely qualities, she unfortunately was also a textbook covert narcissist and a malignant narcissist. And she had a deep... My father and I were talking about this the other day, and we were trying to kind of come to the root of it. It seemed like she was incredibly envious of our dynamic. And I was speaking to my friend Asa Santiago, who wrote this great polarity book that I'll probably plug sometime in this podcast today. And he and I were talking, and it seemed very clear that my mother was the archetype of baby girl, and a non-integrated, unhealthy baby girl. Often she views her partner, her husband, her whatever, as her father, and there can be a lot of rivalry in there, even with her own children. So there was a lot going on. But long story short, due to all different situations with my mother's, however she felt about me, whether it was intimidation, envy, hatred, whatever, I had a very troubling home life. It was not safe there. It was not emotionally or psychologically safe. And so I wound up on the streets in my teens because, a lot of people wonder, like, how does that happen? And I like to break it down very simply. If a kid is on the streets, that means that the streets offer them more safety and more options than their home life. And by that, like at home, I was not allowed to say no. That wasn't an option. And I wasn't allowed to fight back. There was no privacy. There was no safety. On the streets, I could say no and I could fight back. And, that's what was required of me. So it was kind of like releasing the demons and all that pressure that built up from feeling powerless for so long, for well over a decade. And then from there, it was about finding my way. There was a lot to unpack, so I don't know how deep you want to go.
Yeah. I don't want you to get too ahead of the story there. Maybe just talk a little bit about, so when you end up leaving home, is that your mother kicking you out, or you kind of tapping into your independence and you're leaving?
Yeah.
And then when you're on the streets, like, what is that like? Is it like you're battling to survive and get food? Like, what does that teach you about yourself in terms of your resilience and parts of yourself that was it even what's the right word, like almost enlivening, like, oh wow, I get to express my boundaries even though I'm on the streets when I was in a nice home, but I never got to access those parts of myself. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of that.
So to answer your first question,
Yeah.
it wasn't easy leaving home.
Mm.
There were, it happened quite a few times where I would try to leave, and then they would, get the cops to bring me back or whatever. There was always this, with a narcissist, image is everything, right? And it's all
Yeah.
about manipulating the narrative and painting a picture. So I had zero advocacy. My mother managed to charm the pants off of well, it's probably not the best metaphor. She was able to very masterfully manipulate the narrative with counselors, with teachers, with anybody that I could possibly try to find some kind of advocacy and safety with. She would come in and paint a different picture, and my father, unfortunately, when he was around, he always backed her up.
Mm.
And so it felt like a trap. And then there were times where um, things would implode and she would kick me out, but she'd always wait until I was at my most vulnerable. I remember one time she kicked me out. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I I was barely dressed. I had a thin tank top on and a pair of really tiny shorts that I sleep in and nothing else. I had nothing else on me, no shoes, nothing. And I had this crucial moment. I remember standing there and being like, okay, we were in a new location. I didn't really know many people. I only had maybe 2 friends in the entire city. I was thinking to myself, okay, do I walk to a payphone and borrow a quarter dressed like this at night? And it was in a city. It wasn't like a, a, a nice suburb. It was like I would have to go to a busy gas station. And I pondered it. I remember just sitting there, like racking my brain at age 16, like, what do I do? And so a lot of it was jumping through hoops and figuring out what's going to work. So I was officially out of there shortly after that. And it was invigorating, to say the least. Growing up in Europe, I cultivated a great deal of self-sufficiency. By age 12, I was hopping on the train with my friends and we were going to France for the day or going to the market in Metz. Um, it it wasn't daunting for me to be on my own, and I had to navigate that in multiple languages, so being back in the States, it was like no big deal. And I had made ties to different people, so I kind of knew where I wanted to be. And the first thing that I fell into, because let's be real, when I was in my mid-teens, I was struggling to make sense out of any of this. And for anybody who's listening who's dealt with a narcissist, they do their best to make everything look perfect from the outside, but from the inside, there is a level of destruction that, I mean, if anything, psychologically, it's worse than being in an outwardly uh, destructive environment. Like when you can see, oh, there's active drug abuse going on, there's active neglect going on. You have access to help, like people believe you. But when everything is covert and it's hidden and it's layered upon lie after lie after lie after you know superficial veiling, it distorts not only the truth, but it also programs the child of the narcissist to, one, not trust themselves or their judgment, and to perpetually give their power away to appease the parent, right? Because my mother she was not in control of herself. She was the only thing I was terrified of growing up. Which it took me a while to realize that, because I thought, I was afraid of everything, but really it was her. She would go to great extremes to get her way. And that naturally kind of taught my father and myself to fall in line. And he genuinely loved her. So he he protected her, and he would throw me under the bus in order to protect himself. And, you know, now that he and I have an amazing relationship, we've gotten to talk about this a lot and kind of clear it up. But the other problem with living with a narcissist is they kind of control not just the narrative, but the filter through which you see things through. And that was my father's experience. And he was kind of baffled by it once she passed last year. It was almost like the spell was broken and the veil was lifted and he could see things for how they truly were. And he needed to process that. It was almost shocking to him that he was that controlled by her. And it really affected him. He started questioning himself on a deep level, which I think is good. I think that's what happens. It's part of the healing process when you overcome narcissistic programming and wounding is you have to dismantle everything that you thought was real. So long story short, to answer your question about what it was like on the streets. So I don't want to paint a picture that any of it was glamorous, but for me, it was my first taste of freedom. I could make my own decisions and choices. I was free. So even though it was pretty rough and incredibly dangerous, I was allowed to be myself for the first time. And it was really good for me. I feel like all those many years of being absolutely powerless, this was my opportunity to unleash that and really show up for myself. And I don't know if it's because of my relationship with my father or just my natural inclinations. There was one thing I was always really good at ever since I was little. Actually, two things: dancing and fighting. And there were many times I had to fight for my life, and it almost woke something up in me. And it was a really bizarre but profound way to take my power back. Now, given eventually I had to unlearn that as my way of retrieving my power and, you know, be able to handle things in a less confrontational and dangerous way. But that was a huge clearing for me. And it, I would say being on the streets was intense. It was also really fun. It's so free. You don't have any plans. You just kind of go with the flow. It was my first lesson in law of attraction. And I had to learn that one the hard way. You really do get what you focus on. So you gotta clean it up. Because, you know, I had a great deal of drug addiction to work through. Drug addiction usually comes from something deep inside of us that's missing, right? Any kind of addiction is trying to fill something that's missing, something that we're running away from. So drug addiction is always related with avoidance and a deep inner wound. And so originally it took me on all different paths, but I'm grateful that it landed me pretty quickly by age 17, 18. No, I was 17, into the squatter punk community of New York City in the East Village. And I ended up living in a squat called Ninth and D with a few friends of mine. And that was really activating because all of a sudden I went from, you know, spending my life suppressed and controlled and not really having a voice, not being able to have an opinion or have my own feelings. That's the other thing about being raised by a narcissist is they're intimidated and threatened by you having your own personality and opinions and feelings. And they want you to adopt their feelings. And it's a really interesting, very destructive control dynamic. And so in this anarchist squatter punk community, I got to really bring out some of my survival skills. And that's when I started learning construction. And I really dove into activism. There was a lot going on during that time. It was right after Tompkins Square Park, Tent City was dismantled. In retrospect, for good reasons, but it displaced a lot of people. And then a huge, you know, like another wave of squatter punk activism grew up from that point. And anybody that is familiar with that area of Manhattan, it it really experienced a great deal of neglect, especially after World War II. So by the 70s and 80s, there was just a ton of abandoned buildings. It was one of the most dangerous areas in New York City, in Manhattan, definitely. And people who could no longer afford rent were basically, going into these abandoned buildings and fixing them up. And then,
Wow.
then there was
Yeah.
conflict down the road, especially in the 90s is when it really started happening. Things started, gentrification was coming in starting in the mid to late 90s in that area. And so then people were fighting for their right to live in these spaces and the homes that they fixed up, because they didn't own them. They were either privately owned by slumlords or bought up by investors, or they were owned by the city. So it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I learned a
Yeah.
great deal. And so by the
Yeah.
time I was 19, I ended up moving to West Philadelphia and starting my own squat there. And I opened a home in West Philadelphia, or in Philadelphia in general. When I first moved there in the late 90s, there were over 40,000 abandoned buildings.
Sure.
They had suffered a pretty extreme white flight, so to say. And it was disenfranchised. It was kind of abandoned. Nobody really wanted to live in a lot of the homes that were built post or during the Industrial Revolution. They built up the city significantly from 1870s and 90s until like 1920. And so with neglect, a lot of those buildings were just, many were dilapidated. A lot of the factories moved.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
it was like a post-apocalyptical playground. Like I
Yeah.
was thrilled. I was having the best time. It was a lot of urban adventures. Oh goodness, I could talk about that for days. So I don't want to
I
distract,
can
but
imagine. Yeah,
mhm.
there's a lot going on there. I was a little bit curious. Like, obviously, you have this relationship with your mother and father, where like you can't feel you can be yourself with your mother, and you feel like your father's also taking your mother's side. What's so cool about your story is like the healing that you've done, even the situation you grew up with your mother, like the healing work you've now done around that years later and reconnecting with your father. But back then, how would you say, looking back, your relationship with like the masculine or the feminine was at that time? Because obviously our parents are the first encounter with the feminine or the masculine. And although obviously you saw a lot of good traits in your mother and your father, it sounded like there was also a bit of a disconnect. So do you think you carried some of that, like once you left the house, like distrusting of authority, whether it be men or even like distrusting of a woman because of like the situations you dealt with? How did that kind of play out in that phase of your life? Did you have like little boyfriends out there? Did you have like girls you were close to, or you just like little Miss Independent?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mm.
And again, lots to unpack. So
Yeah.
I pretty much grew up with full-fledged duality. I was a 100% tomboy and I was also a 100% girly girl because of my mom's dysfunction. I try to highlight the things about her that are good because I know it's,
Mm,
she passed. I don't really want to speak ill of the
mm,
deceased.
mm,
And at the same
mm,
time, so much more healing has happened since she
mhm.
passed. That was not possible while she was still alive. Whew, what a lady. I've never had quite an adversary like her. So I got to give her credit where credit's due.
Mm,
She definitely tempered me in ways that no one else could.
mm,
So I think in many respects, I rejected femininity and I had a very distorted and dysfunctional example and view of femininity. One, my mother was highly inappropriate. Um, oh, how much do I want to get into with that? Um, I was not protected growing up. I was exposed constantly to adult situations. I think the first strip show I ever saw was on our coffee table in our living room at a party. I think my
how
parents
old were
often for
you?
4. I think
Mm,
my parents, my mother didn't want to be a mother, and I think she often forgot that she was. And because I was so independent and used to constant changes with our military lifestyle, that it was easy for her to forget that she had a kid. Um, my parents liked to party. They liked to, My dad worked hard. He was sent away often on military missions, TDY as it's called, temporary duty, and he had quite an impressive career. You know, he was flying gunships. He was heavily involved with the Noriega stuff and the Iran Contra. He even just recently told me about some highly classified missions he was on in the 80s that I didn't know about. I just knew my dad was gone. And then, of course, he was shipped out right after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and he was in Operation Desert Storm. But during this time, going back to early childhood, there's a part of me that rejected my femininity, but the only femininity that I really had any concept, and I guess I was deeply influenced by, was the part of me that was heavily sexualized, even at a young age. So there was a lot of dysfunction there.
Mm.
And what I would
Do you mean
witness,
like in terms of like the power of a woman's sexuality and how she can use that to influence people or men, that side of it? Mm.
exactly. So what I witnessed from my mother is, everything was surface level with her. Everything was image. And she was quite beautiful. She was blonde, blue eyed. She was like 5'11". But she was overtly sexual. It was like that was the only place she had her power, was out in the world or with men, but also my father. And she heavily emphasized looks. So she, I think for her, the only way she could really relate to me as her daughter was if I was her little doll, right? That she could dress up, that she could be proud of, that she could show off. And when I wasn't that for her, because I was such a tomboy and I was so independent and I just wanted to go be outside and get dirty and all these things, I think she really struggled with that. Now, on the flip side of that, she enrolled me in ballet, and that was wonderful for me because ballet is incredibly demanding and physical, and I needed that. And it is a discipline, and I've always, throughout my life, have um, received a significant benefit from anything that cultivates discipline, especially, physical discipline. But I think she had a different view for me in mind. And unfortunately, she pushed a lot of sexualization on me. And there were just so many instances that I was unprotected. And it was, yeah. So long story short, by the time I'm on my own in my teens, especially on the streets, it's not really safe to be feminine when you're unsheltered, unprotected, and not provided for. So I think it really brought out my masculine tendencies. I looked up to my father so much, I kind of just embodied that warrior spirit, and being on the streets allowed me to really flex those warrior skills. And I quickly found different sifus, and I trained martial arts. I was a tough girl. I had to, had to do lots of crazy stuff. I was also heavily involved with skateboarding, and I don't really want to go into it too much because it's a lot and it's dark and heavy. But I also, when we first moved back to the United States, and even in Europe before we moved, I did get pulled in very quickly to various gangs, and I think I was just an easy target. I didn't have any protection. I didn't have any brothers or sisters. I was an only child. I didn't have safety at home. I desperately wanted to belong to something. So I also have an entire history involved with gangs, both in Europe when I was, starting at 13, and then full-fledged in the US from like 14, 15. And then that's when a lot of really bad stuff happened and I was able to miraculously get out. But it was something that kind of followed me throughout my life because of my inclinations and because of, I guess, being attracted to dangerous men. I
Mm.
think that was
Mm.
part of, you know, needing that protection.
Mm.
So throughout my time in Philadelphia, I actually had a lot of protection.
Mm.
Um, and that, pretty quickly grew from my situation. I was really fortunate in some ways, and at the same time, it was crazy. It was a crazy life. So the masculinity protected me, but as soon as I was able to get my foot in the door, I also was, I was engaging in sex work. I
Mm,
was stripping.
mm,
I was, I was, I didn't do any escorting. Like that was never
mhm,
my thing,
mhm,
but it
mhm,
was this, okay, how do I embody the feminine and get what I need? And it was always related to sex dynamics, power, sex
mhm,
and power dynamics.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and it's sad when I look back that there was no instruction whatsoever for me to understand feminine energy and to be able to safely lean into that. It just wasn't safe. So that's kind of the path that this journey went on for me is I rejected all of my femininity, yet simultaneously exploited myself through it in
mhm,
order to get my needs met financially. And so that was a
mhm.
lot to heal and dismantle and
Yeah,
work through. And
yeah.
and during that whole time, I was cultivating such masculine energy, like I was working construction full time. I was training martial arts. I had been in situations where I had to fight for my life. These are scenarios of masculine rites of passage that a lot of our men aren't getting anymore, and they genuinely need them. And so that's another reason why I love working with men, because I feel like I got a lot of what they needed, but in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. I want to unpack that the dangerousness part because myself also I'm an only child, like no brothers or sisters. Also, my dad wasn't really around. My parents got divorced and he moved over to the UK. We were living in South Africa, so I also had like that yearning that you spoke about. It's like I want to be a part of something. I want to belong to something. And my mom's a great woman, but she couldn't really teach me how to be a man. She was very nice and polite, and then I turned into this very nice, polite guy, which obviously women don't really find attractive when it's not authentic. It's just like this fake niceness. It's really like approval seeking down at the core of it. And then I kind of stumbled across like the pickup artist community, like guys teaching seduction skills. But also, although some of the skills can be helpful, it's also mainly from my perspective coming from like a place of wounding. It's like I never really got to model masculinity from my father or someone in my life, but hey, these guys are out there, they're telling me how to talk to girls, and I can see myself getting some results. So yeah, when you don't have that belonging growing up and you have that yearning, you do become more susceptible to, in your case, gangs or whatever these things are. And yeah, like you said, maybe that wasn't the best course of action, and yet you learn a lot about yourself in the process. So one of the things you mentioned, and I know you're really passionate about talking about this, about men developing their dangerous side. And I know there's a lot of talk of toxic masculinity and like men are really afraid to access that parts of themselves. But given your situation growing up, like you were around a lot of really dangerous men, whether that's like on the good side, whether it's like army generals and people in the military, those men are dangerous, but maybe more on the good side, or maybe on the gang side where they're not good guys, but yes, they do protect you. They do have access to their dangerousness. So maybe just from a woman's perspective, what are like the positives of a guy having access to that? Because the message they get from all women is like, we don't like that, that's terrible, get rid of it. So what is some of your thoughts on that?
I love this question.
Mm,
There's so much to go into. Oh my goodness, you touched on so many things, and I was like, oh, yes, let's dive in. So I want to address the nice guy syndrome really quick. It is
mm,
often, I think the pickup artist thing is both a overcompensation for that nice guy rejection experience, but it's deeply rooted in misogyny.
mm.
And
How
this whole
so?
concept, because it's highly manipulative. It doesn't see a woman as her own individual. It's not respected. There's no respect for the woman, or more importantly, there's no real devotion for the woman. He's not coming in to really take care of her, right? To shelter her, to provide and protect her. He's trying to pick her up to exploit her. Really, is
Mm,
what what it's really about. Um,
And it's more for himself, like his own ego,
yeah,
it's more, it's not even like you said, it's like, oh cool, you can have these conversations with these women, but it's more like you're trying to get your own little ego hit. And I went through my own journey with that. It's like at some point I'm like, what am I even doing this for? It's just like to prove to myself that I'm not worthless, so to speak, because I felt like that so much growing up. So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming from a deep place of insecurity and trying to feel better. If anything, it's related to Schadenfreude, where you actually want to take from someone in order to make yourself feel like better, that you have more worth, that you have some kind of standing, that you're superior in some way, that you can take advantage of someone. So one of the reasons I got into men's work is because I saw online how much toxic information was out there for men. And I was just like, oh my God, men are so incredibly underserved in this area. And I could teach them all sorts of things. One thing I didn't touch on that you asked me was about boyfriends and close friends, girlfriends. We can come back to that. But yes, I predominantly dated, well, I dated men and women ever since I was 13, 14. But I was actually talking with my friend Asa about this because it was kind of funny thinking back. Even when I had a boyfriend, um, there was a lot of there was a lot of duality in my relationship exploration. I almost always had a girlfriend at the same time. Like I almost always had like a side chick. So when I first started working with men, I thought it was really beneficial for them to hear from a woman who not only has a female nervous system, has complete integration of an understanding of female arousal, but who has also been with women and understands those nuances, because women are
I'm curious.
complex.
Sorry to jump in there. What was the dynamic like with the guys? Were you more of like submissive and the girly girl, and with the girls maybe leading them, or different depending on the
Yeah.
partner?
It was different depending upon the partner. I was incapable of being fully submissive during that time. There was too much wounding, too much trauma. I was very naturally dominant. I had spent a lot of time cultivating that. I had a couple partners who were really dominant, and we just kind of play off of each other. Um, I don't have a great relationship history. I was able to remain friends with a lot of the people that I had been with, just from, mutual respect and clear communication. But there was a lot of toxic behaviors there too. And unfortunately, um, I've had to look at some of the ways I treated my girlfriends were not exactly devotional, to say the least. Like that, my own, I would say, call it the toxic feminine meets toxic masculine, really spilled over in all of those dynamics. But it was also the birth of my path as a dominatrix, so it was an entire healing journey that could literally take hours to get into. So I just want to touch on the important parts. But let's go back to danger, because this is one of my favorite topics when it comes to men. um, Ultimately, what women are looking for in a man isn't an asshole, right? We don't want an asshole who treats us poorly and goes around creating conflict everywhere we go. What we ultimately want is to feel safe. And so I want to talk briefly about the various types of dangerous men I've had in my life, because it's very revealing. So, some of the dangerous men in my life, that who I met on the streets or through gangs, whatever, there were two main types. The one who had really cultivated his power and was truly dangerous usually was a very calm personality. He was quiet. He could handle a great deal, and he did it almost effortlessly behind the scenes, right? This is not your most common personality or a man. Like, this is a man who really has faced death. He's met himself. He has generated a great deal of confidence from his own competency. Truly dangerous men, the kind of danger that women want to be with, whether they can admit it to themselves or not, are deeply calming and soothing to be around. I noticed the same energy in uh, a lot of the military leaders that I was exposed to as a child. Like when my father was on and he was not engaging with my mother, he was so he, there was no safer place for me to be. It's probably why I adored him so much. His entire presence was incredibly calming because I knew no matter what went down, he had it handled. Same with, you know, I met General Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, all those things, all those high-ranking officers in the Joint Chiefs of Staff when my father was working at the Pentagon. And again, when you're around these level of men, there is a calm presence. There is a level of self-control that is undeniable, and it is so attractive to women because we naturally feel safer and freer in that environment. So flip to a different type of dangerous men. We have our erratic, out of control, highly impulsive, anxious man. This man is a danger to everyone. He doesn't provide the calm and safe. So I want to be really clear what I mean by danger, because we can talk about two different types of danger. The danger that I want men to cultivate is the danger that comes from competency, self-control, meeting yourself through very difficult challenges, and then really finding yourself on the other side and creating internal safety. Because until you have that internal safety, you can't give it to someone else. You can't provide it. And so what women are looking for isn't the douchebag, right? Who's dangerous on the outside. What we ultimately want is the man who can handle life, and especially himself. So what I love to do with my clients is explore that inner monster. And we find him and we bring him out, right? And we let him be as big and ferocious and dangerous and deadly and destructive as he needs to be. And we do that in a container of safety. And in this container of safety, you really get to train your dragon, so to say. You get to train your inner monster so that he no longer is wreaking havoc and sabotaging behind the scenes. He is 100% in your control. And it's a superpower to have him trained and disciplined inside of you, because there are situations where he's needed. He's going to make everything better and safer, especially for the vulnerable, but only when he is trained and self-controlled. So this is something that I really like to talk about, because to me, the toxic masculinity, it has nothing to do with masculinity. All it is a lack of self-control, a lack of self-sovereignty, a lack of personal ownership, and and then all the other little culprits that come in, like low T, and not really having a solid relationship with yourself, not having internal safety. And so I absolutely love being around dangerous men. I prefer it. And I think it's important for us to allow men to be men in the most beautiful and profound ways that only masculinity really offers.
Yeah, 100%. So many good points. I also like the differentiation, because when people think, oh, we want dangerous men, they immediately think of like a psychopath or a guy who comes in and he's screaming and he's breaking bottles, which is actually not what you're talking about at all.
No,
He's very calm, he's very collected, he's grounded. When push comes to shove, he can access a part of himself that will demolish things, but that's not his natural mode of operating. And I think maybe a lot of us grew up in families like, say, the alcoholic father who was just all over the place. So when we think of like dangerous men, we have that image of that father or someone who is abusive towards us, and then we say, I don't want to be that. But I think what's needed so much in this time, because then what happens is, like, as men, we disown that part of ourselves. We're like, oh, I saw that angry man, like, that's not good, I'll pretend I'm not that. And then we get a situation in a larger society scale where men are just very passive, and they're the ones that need to step up when things are going out of control. They need to be the ones that say, no, enough of this. But men today, or in masculinity in general, it's very subdued. It's just like go along to get along, nodding heads. And yeah, no one's standing up and saying no to a lot of the bad things that are going on. So from what I'm
Right.
hearing from you, it's helping men get that part of themselves so they can direct their own life, they can make their partner feel safe, and also in the larger community of the world, be out there and call out things that are not right.
Yes, exactly. And to me, that's what masculinity really is. Masculinity, like real solid masculinity, is nonconformist. It is highly sovereign. And we need highly controlled, highly trained, dangerous men in complete voluntary self-control to handle these psychopaths, these people, the men that have no control, the men who have no boundaries, the men who have no constraint, the men who do not have that inner moral compass. And if the men are told that their masculinity is toxic, they're going to not just shut that down, but like you mentioned, they're going to reject those parts of themselves that they actually need to cultivate in order to make the world better and safer for everyone, but especially women, children, and the vulnerable. And this is very, very clearly how I raise my sons. I'm like, they know that like their highest path as men is they make the world better and safer for everyone, especially the vulnerable. And
Yeah.
it's been just absolutely amazing getting to see their progress and as they grow up. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really important for men to understand that playing nice guy, like one of the first things they need to do is they need to deal with their own insecurities and their anxiety. If you have anxiety as a man, you are not in control of yourself. You know, you're being controlled by the internal dialogue. You're being controlled by this constant inner critic and judgment. And you're not, it filters everything that you're encountering. And it makes it impossible for you to really step into your masculine presence and power. And the other thing about this anxiety, it's got to go immediately because it feels horrible and so unattractive to women. We're looking for that hickory of a man who just by being in his presence, we feel like melting. We feel like we can let go. We feel like we can be childlike and enthusiastic and playful. And you got it because then the women around you will really respond differently. They will have big smiles on their faces. They will relax. They're easy to lead because you're actually leading, you know? But the anxiety piece and confronting the inner monster, that is, it's foundational work from my perspective, because otherwise it's going to
Yeah.
constantly be there operating behind the scenes, sabotaging everything. And you may think that you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the response from women. It's because her nervous system is like, this ain't it. This is not my man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's the deeper work, guys. Like I know it's hard, but we're here. We're here to do our work.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was interesting going through the pickup scene for a long time because a very common phenomenon is of approach anxiety, which is
Yes.
like, okay, you're out there and there's a girl you want to go see, and then it was just fascinating to see different men like go through this. Sometimes these guys are in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, like successful in the world in terms of money. They're some accountant, they work at this JP Morgan or whatever, but you just put them in a room and you see a pretty girl and say, go talk to her. It's like something else just completely takes this guy over. So although there weren't, there were some things that weren't great about the pickup scene, it was really interesting to see men in that environment where like the rubber meets the road. And the longer I went on this journey, because they would talk a lot about like conversational skills or techniques, like you say this, then you say that, then you say that. But what I would observe is like you'd take 10 guys and they'd all be taught like the same thing to say, and they'd go out there and do it, but they'd get wildly different results. And the more I learned about man woman relating and seduction, and as I started going deeper, it's like, yeah, you'd see these guys be like, hi, I just saw you there, I thought you were beautiful, and the girl's like, what the fuck, like getting creeped out. And then another guy would be like more calm, more chill. He would just go over there, have a conversation. You could see like the girl's eyes just light up, like going to a feminine. But I also feel like a lot of guys, they just want the quick fix, or it's been that way for a while. It's like, give me the line. Like, what do I say to the girl? When meanwhile, it's like, bro, you've got so much other crap that you haven't worked on here. You're afraid of your own sexual desire. You don't know how to lead people. You don't know how to lead yourself. You're full of anxiety and self-doubt. It's like, well, even if I tell you something to say, none of it's going to matter, because sooner or later she's going to feel your energy. She's going to see what you're really about. And I think only once men have failed trying to go down that road will they start to go deeper and, find your coaching and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good point that you're mentioning.
Well, this is one thing that really attracted me to your work is you were helping guys with approach anxiety, but you weren't slapping a band-aid on it like I see from so many other coaches. You were going deep. You were going into containment. You were going into leadership. You were going into the real juice, the foundational work. It's there's no easy way out. The only way out is through. And I just want everyone to know that and hear that. And here's the cool thing. And this is what I teach my sons. And I love this because I get to immediately see the results with them. I let them know, like in life, and especially for men, what we need more than anything are challenges, because this is how we grow and this is how we meet ourselves. And men are biologically designed to handle high levels of stress and intensity and challenges, not just better than women, but it actually is the path to their development and maturity. And they can't fully reach manhood without it. And so, I just want all men to hear this. Like, if you really want to embody that masculinity that makes women melt and admire you, you're going to have to do the hard things. You're going to have to do the hard things. You're going to have to meet yourself at that place where you don't think you can continue. And then you break through it. And then you do it again and again. And then you become the man that not only can lead yourself through anything, but you become the man that people seek out, that people admire, that is magnetic to everything he wants, because that's the beauty of personal responsibility and self-sovereignty, is you get to this level where you don't have to actually try to control anything other than yourself. And in controlling yourself, having that level of genuine ownership, everything around you just handles itself. It falls into place. Whether you're creating active external systems or whether you're just honing your frequency to the point where, your calming presence moves mountains. So I think it's probably one of the most important things that we can communicate in general on the topic of masculinity is, in order to really be the man you want to be, you're going to have to do the hard things.
Yeah.
And there's so much treasure in it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we touch on, I know it came up once or twice. Obviously, you're raising sons yourself. And
Yes.
obviously, one of the big areas, it's not that, oh, when you're 18 or 19 as a man, you don't know how to talk to girls. So now you got to go learn pickup. It's really, you didn't have a good model of masculinity growing up, because it's mainly modeled, like almost taught through osmosis in a way. And
Yeah.
one of the big ways it can get squashed out, I know you speak about the mother wound, is like mothers putting out that dangerousness in their sons. Hey, good boys don't do that. Like, always, of course, be nice and kind, but it's almost like shaming those parts of his masculinity for whatever reason. That's what the culture says. That's how you fit in at school. Blah 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 blah. So I know some of the work you're doing now is actually with helping mothers, and you're going to be doing more of that. So what does that look like? Maybe you could. I don't know if you have an example or two, like, what's a situation where with your son, if you were trying to stamp out his masculinity, you would say, no, no, don't do that, versus how you're doing it, where it might not be like, hey, beat up that kid at school, but it's like, okay, how can you do it in a healthy way to help him nourish that part of himself without being ashamed of it? So I don't know if you could speak on that a bit.
Oh, I so can. I'm
Mm,
laughing because I actually did teach my kids how to handle bullies, and
mm,
I teach them how
mm,
to fight because
mm,
I think it's an
mm,
important skill.
mhm,
So let's touch on the problem just for a minute before we go into the solution, because I really want it. I want us to hone in on what's going on. So, um, I think what we're dealing with is we had this pattern of inequality and abuse of power for so long, and in an attempt to create equality and to heal this wound, that pendulum just swung so far in the other direction. Where now, I think the latest the latest statistic that I received yesterday, because I was trying to do a little bit of prep for this, um, is 43% of our boys, and I think this might just be the US, are being raised in single parent households predominantly by women. Okay. So that's an issue right there, because we need solid, good role models, and in a traditional dynamic, the man is holding the masculine pole and setting that example. Boom. And hopefully it's healthy, right? And I get that we did have a pattern of it not being all that healthy, and whatever, we're working through it as we can. However, if we have a single mom household, we have an extra problem to deal with, because one, if the woman is now in the role of provider and protector, she is most likely no longer in her feminine. If she is a genuinely feminine woman, two things are going to happen. She's either very quickly going to attract a masculine man and she's no longer going to be a single mom. Hooray. Or she is going to be in her masculine, or no, that's right. We're staying in feminine. Her feminine energy is going to be chaotic. There's not going to be a lot of structure in the house. And she's not going to be able to teach her sons how to be men. And she's not going to be able to show her daughters um, how to have healthy dynamics with men. So that's one aspect. And I'll say she's a provider and protector now as a single mom, and she is full in her masculine. Well, then a few things happen that are also very destructive. Is one, she's not nurturing that feminine dynamic that our children need, especially our sons. They need a soft place to land. They need healthy touch. They need intimacy that is not sexual in nature, and they need emotional intelligence. They need their hearts and inner core nourished. And a masculinized woman is not going to this isn't going to come naturally to her. We'll say that. She's going to struggle with this. So then also what usually happens is this masculinized woman, instead of instilling these qualities in her son, she removes them from him and does everything from him. And in the process, through her own masculine trauma, masculinized trauma, emasculates her son. She'll probably do his laundry until, he even moves out of the house. She will not teach him self-control. She doesn't give him hard things to do. She does it all herself with the burden of her own martyrdom. We've seen it all before. I almost got caught up in the spiral, and then I flipped the switch. And for me, I'm a slightly different paradigm. I cultivated all this masculine energy. It's not a facade or a front for me. It is a genuine skill. It is a wholly integrated place for me, especially once I healed my feminine. So I actually, I'll tell you my secret as a single mom is my masculine energy actively creates a container for my feminine. He goes in, and I just use the pronouns because it works for me. He goes in and he creates systems of order, structure, and discipline. And because of that solid container of integrity, my feminine gets to be free and playful and fun and soft. And I get to take naps. and, and I get to be the queen of my house and not the embittered martyr and slave. Like it's a huge different dynamic. So this is actually a little preview of what I'm going to be teaching in my Mars Rising work for moms. Even if they're single moms, there's ways we can create balance and we can really create healthy dynamics, because our sons need our femininity and they need healthy examples of masculinity. So I think there was another question you asked, and I'm spacing on what it was. Oh yeah, examples. Okay, I got so many. So, oftentimes mothers shelter their sons. They do it with the best intentions, right? They're scared. They haven't really handled their own fear, their own insecurities. All of that bleeds over to their children. So they helicopter, and they're constantly trying to control all the outcomes. But our kids need to learn consequences, and they need to learn them early on. I'm going to get so much backlash on this. I know it. I'm expecting it. Because I'm going to be instructing moms to allow your sons to get hurt, allow them to do hard things, allow them to struggle, allow them to figure stuff out. Stay there. Let them know, they're not alone. You're right there holding space for them, believing in them, seeing them as successful, seeing them overcome the hardship, but not removing it from them, because it's literally the worst thing mothers can do to their children, especially their sons. And they do it so prolifically. I have such a hard time watching it, and they have such a hard time watching me parent, because I'm that mom where, like one of the recent examples that I can pull from, and then we'll go into the thing that made me laugh about teaching my kids how to handle bullies and fights at school. Is we have an above ground pool in our backyard that the boys and my sons and I put together last year. We love it. It's so nice. It's Florida. It's stupid hot here. And I told them I was very much a daredevil and tomboy growing up. So I'm open with them about all the things, and I've given them ample opportunity. I taught them to skateboard, ride bikes. We did circus for many years together. I'm still an aerialist. I pushed them to learn their bodies, right? And our rule in our home was, I do not teach fear, I teach safety. Safety always comes from within. So they got to check in with themselves. So I told them that one of my favorite things to do when I was a teen, hanging out with my skater crew, is we'd go over to Jimmy's house and we could jump off the roof into the pool. And they were fascinated by that. Like, can we do it? And I'm like, looking at it, and I'm like, you could. You gotta really jump, and you gotta really trust yourself. And if you trust yourself, go for it. And so they got up on the roof and they were daring each other to do it. And they were stalling. I could see the fear building, and you know how that works. The longer you look at it, the bigger it gets. So instead of being the mom in that moment, I became the dad. And I said, you got to eat the frog. The longer you hesitate, the scarier this is going to get. And it's diminishing your confidence. I'm like, just take a deep breath, count to 3, and jump. Just do it. Otherwise, get down. And sure enough, one of them did it, successful. Then the other one was like, okay, now I have to do it. And then he did it. And they're both in the pool now, beaming, triumphant. They went from I'm out there in the deep end. Everything to me is energetics. I see auras, all that kind of stuff. For me, I'm watching their energy this entire time they're on the roof. And I can see where their energy is contracting and shrinking. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, if this keeps up, I'm just going to chide them a little bit, or they can get off the roof, because this isn't working. Once they were in the pool, after doing the scary thing, they looked bigger. It was almost like they grew. They were back in their bodies. Their energy expanded. They were confident. They were beaming. They had so much energy and power. I could just see it emanating off of them. And they were like, let's go, let's do it again. And then that next time, there was no hesitation. They were confident. And now it's like their thing that they do to show off with their friends and like wow their friends. And their friends are like, what just happened? So this is one of those things where I scare the crap out of a lot of moms, because I encourage my sons to be sons and to do the hard things. And my sons are amazing. They're highly trained. I could go off on all of the skills they have right now, but I want to address how to deal with the bullying. So I dealt with a great deal of bullying growing up. One, I was always the new kid. Two, I was the ugly redheaded kid, covered in freckles. Like, redheaded kids have it rough. Let me be real. Until I grew into myself, I was definitely the target of a lot of bullying and a lot of criticism. And, I had to get comfortable being considered the ugly kid. So, long story short, kind of had a master's degree in bullying and how to handle them. Because once I did become a preteen and started getting tough and hot, I bullied the bullies. That was kind of my thing. So with my kids, I teach them how to disarm. That's kind of the foundation of almost all of our self-defense training is disarmament, whether we're using firearms or words. Disarmament is the name of the game. We are the ones that make insults real and threats real. But then there are times, and especially here in the US, I don't know how it is where you grew up, but my oldest son's middle school that he just graduated from, he's going to be homeschooled from here on out because we're done. They had like 3 or 4 Instagram pages solely for the fights that were happening in the school every day. The kids would video them and post them, and there would be multiple posts every day. It was ridiculous. So I taught them very clearly, you don't ever start a fight. We end them quickly. And I taught them all the different ways, to duck, dive, always stay aware, hypervigilantly aware, anticipate what's about to happen, protect yourself, protect your energy, breathe through the fear that comes up. We did a lot of nervous system regulation. And then I taught them how to really fight. Like if someone's swinging at you and you need it to end, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pop them in the trachea hard and fast. You're going to knock the air out of them. One, they can't scream and get a lot of attention, so then you can get away with it a lot easier. And 2, it is a psychological tactic that makes people go, oh, crap, I don't want to fight this person anymore. And then there's a couple pressure point things that I taught them and arm bars and everything. But yeah, I teach my kids to fight. I teach them to end fights, not start them. And I think that this is really important. I love that I have more than one son because even when they were younger, one of our disciplinary measures, I decided to get a trampoline outside. And so as part of their discipline, if they needed a timeout, I would set the timer to 3 minutes, and they were required to jump as hard and fast as they could on that trampoline until that timer went off. And it was highly effective because even before that timer went off, I had a completely different child. He got that energy out. He was smiling and laughing. He was in a much better mood. He calmed himself down on his own. And he would always come in and apologize, ready to be in control of himself. So men biologically need physical exertion in order to access the depth of their emotions. I know this as a woman. I need everybody else to know this. Like, we cannot sit a man in a corner or a boy or sit him in a sofa in a therapist's office and expect him to talk about his feelings and think about what he did. There has to be a breakthrough that happens for him physically. And I think you know what I'm talking about. He needs to feel that essence in himself, that true masculinity. It needs to come up. And then men can really have a full range and depth of emotion, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think men are actually more romantic than women. They could be more sensitive than women sometimes, but not until they access it. So I could talk about this for hours, so I just want to kind of pull back and
No, it's cool. It's awesome to hear some practical examples, because sometimes people talk about these concepts, but it's not where the rubber meets the road, but you're living it, which is so cool. And it's also like you see all parts of your son, like or both of your sons. It's like you don't just see the nice part or the sensitive part. It's like you see the full range of them, and that's all okay with you, or you make room for it. Or if they got to do a timeout, they got to do a timeout. And it's so cool to hear how you encourage those parts of them facing their fears. Because whether it's jumping off the pool or like asking the cute girl out or going after or starting the business that they want, it's that same mechanism. And if you've trained them to lean into that in terms of checking in with their safety, yeah, it really sounds like someone's somatic experience, what's going on in their body and their mind, training their nervous system. Like that's obviously a big focus for you. And it's amazing how it rubs off onto your boys. And when you're talking about moms there for a second, like I was getting flashbacks to my childhood because I was also raised by a single mom, very loving, amazing woman. But I think that love also went too far, like doing everything for me. You know, it's like she would make my lunchbox and I didn't really have chores. And at the time, I thought I was winning. You know, I'd go to my friend's house and they'd have to like wash dishes and do all this stuff. I'm like, oh, your life sucks. But then, like, later when I grew up, I'm like, wow, that's actually important for a young boy to learn at a young age. One of the best things my mom did was send me to boarding school when I was 13, 14. So it kind of broke some of that mama's boy stuff when you're around other men and you got to kind of, learn to survive without mommy. So that's really good. I don't know if you've crossed this bridge yet. I'm curious, like, how sexuality is almost taught in a household, whether it's to young men or to young women, like how to not disown their sexuality, like, oh, it's bad, it's wrong, like you should be ashamed of this, but then not have a situation maybe like where you grew up where it was like hypersexualized, over sexualized. I don't know if you've crossed that bridge yet, but I'm sure you've
Oh
got
yeah.
some thoughts on that in terms of, yeah, how do you kind of deal with the topic of sexuality with the young children or as they're growing up?
That is a great question. First
Mm.
off, I just want to say that your mom putting you in boarding school was probably the smartest move for her
Yeah,
and for
yeah,
you. And
yeah.
I think that it gave you a great deal. And I'm really glad she made that decision, even though it was probably really shocking and hard for you at first.
Mm.
I think
Yeah,
that's exactly what you need.
yeah.
I'm a firm believer that men need tribes of men. They need men in
Mhm,
their life. It's so important. When I meet a man or I have a new client or whatever, one of the first questions I have is, who are the men in your life? And if they don't have close male friends, if they're not bonded into a group, that tells me we have deep things going on, almost always deep mother wounds. So, um, the topic of sexuality, yes. So I'm a firm believer that sex is not for children. I know that there are some people that are like, but kids, no. And that's from my particular background. Now,
mhm,
my childhood was overly sexualized, but
mhm,
there was no education. In fact,
mm,
the most fortunate thing that happened to me was I was raised over in Germany, where sexuality is just a part of the culture. So even my teen magazine that I started reading at the ripe old age of 10 or 11 had all sorts of information on sex education. So my foundational sex education started by being raised in Germany. And I'm so grateful for that, because when I came back to the States around 14, I knew far more than any of my friends. Yeah. Now, my opinion on how our children need to be protected from that's a whole nother topic. So I'll just talk to
mhm,
you about how I raised my son. So
mm,
one of the first educational experiences I had with them was I was allowing my son, he was probably like 3 years old, to wind down while I was taking care of his baby brother, who actually I guess was about a toddler at that time, almost a toddler. He was allowed to wind down by watching, I think it was like a He-Man or She-Ra, I think it was He-Man on my phone. I was like, he was into He-Man. I was like, He-Man's actually not a bad cartoon. He can watch it a little bit, as he just kind of hangs out, calms himself down. He was alone in his room. And I go in there and I noticed he was potty trained at that time. I potty trained fairly early, but I think it was clothing optional when they were little, just because it's easier to do these things. Plus, it's Florida. It's so stupid hot. Any which way, I walked in there and I noticed that while he was watching his cartoon, he was playing with his penis. He was self-soothing, and he had a tiny little erect toddler penis. And I was thinking to myself, like, okay, let's make sure I do not instill any form of shame. Let's make sure that we do this right. And so I kind of didn't even have to process that. I knew exactly what I wanted to say to him. So the entire education and dialogue that my sons received about their bodies and their sexuality since they were little is, it's okay for you to touch your body and your penis and all of your parts, but we need to follow certain guidelines, especially of privacy and hygiene. So I let them know, if you're going to touch your penis, you have to wash your hands. You don't want pee pee or poo poo germs on mommy's phone that I might put up to my face. Ew. You know, and they get it. They get it immediately. You don't want to put those pee pee or poo poo germs in your mouth or on your toys. We want to stay clean. So if you want to touch yourself, there's 2 rules. I need you to wash your hands afterwards all the time so you don't spread germs. And 2, this is a private experience. I need this to be a private thing between you and your body. This is not for other people. And then from there we evolved into, sex is not for kids. If someone is touching you in your private areas, that is not okay, with either with your consent or without your consent at that age. I need to know about it because, you know, there might be other things going on that are not good for you. Very clear, cut and dry. Made it clear for them, bodily autonomy. No one is allowed to touch your body in a way that you don't like without your permission. You need to tell me. And then as they got older and they understood what sex was in theory only, I let them know, if anybody's exposing you to, one, anything that feels uncomfortable to you, but anything sexual, any materials, anything like that, that is child abuse. And you are not in trouble. And anything they say to you is not going to count. You need to come to me or your dad or a trusted teacher or adult and let us know what's going on. My dog is licking himself and I find that distracting. Please don't do that. You're so handsome. So that was kind of the basis of it. And then before they learned about sex, because I really think that needs to wait until they're, you know, at least middle school age, developing, going through puberty, then it's relevant, because we base it on human development, not sexual activity. Before then, I did, as a mother, because one of my backgrounds is I'm a midwife. I don't know if I told you that, but I'm actually I was a certified professional midwife. I've delivered hundreds of babies, including my sons. I taught them about the menstrual cycle because I wanted them to understand it. I wanted them to see it as natural and normal. And it became such a blessing because they grasped it on such a level that by the time my youngest was like 6, he'd look up at the moon and be able to calculate when my menstrual cycle was going to happen. He would literally look up the moon. He goes, "Mom, you're going to bleed soon." Wow. And I'll never forget, like, one of my friends overheard this and she about lost it. She was like, "Oh my God, how brilliant is that?" And I'm like, well, you know, we're raising future men. Let's let them understand these processes so they know why it's so important to protect it. And so I taught my kids. I have most of my life had a very hard time with my menstrual cycle. So my kids know that during that time I need rest and I'm not going to be on. I try to, you know, my masculine container prepares for it. But then I also got to teach my sons, you know, these are the herbs and the teas and the preparations that are needed. These are the foods that I need to eat. Usually I'd prep food in advance so that they could just heat up stuff. Now they're old enough, they cook, and they bring me teas and they take care of me, and they'll bring me like a heating pack, and they'll check in on me and be like, "Mom, do you need to hydrate? Like, how are you feeling? You need anything?" They step up, they become the men of the house. It's amazing. So now that they both have, so my youngest is in middle school. So he had his sexual ed reproductive health class in school. And it was cute. My older son went through that a couple of years before him. And he and I talked and he was like, "Mom, even though I know these things, I just want you to know I'm not going to tell him because I think it's important. Like you always taught us, we should protect innocence. And so I'm not going to answer his questions until he goes through the class. Is that okay with you?" And I'm like, "That's perfect. Thank you so much." And to me, that's what protective, solid, masculine energy is. Like it's always looking out for, it's protecting the innocent and innocence because it's precious. It needs to be preserved for as long as possible. And he sees it as something that could disrupt my younger son's childhood, or at least thought processes, right? So I thought that was awesome. So, the younger child is more inquisitive. So once he had his reproductive health, human development class at school, he was like, I have questions for you, but I'm not quite ready yet. And I'm like, anytime, honey, you just let me know. But, they come to me with all sorts of issues. One of them had, they're both intact. They're uncircumcised. They were both born at home. I did as few interventions as possible, and that works for us. He had some kind of abscess or zit in between his foreskin and the glands of his penis, and he was like, "What do I do?" And I talked him through it, and instead of me doing it for him, I basically gave him everything he needed, and he was in the shower with the curtain between us, and I talked him through it, and he was successfully able to do it. It was painful for him, but he was like, wow. And then we had a really great conversation about hygiene is really important. This is a sign that you aren't cleaning yourself very well. And when you have foreskin, you need to make sure that you are extra careful with your cleaning, because things can get trapped in there. And so it was a great experience. I love that they trusted me with that. And to me, it's easy. It's easy to give them self-sufficient empowerment to, be like, you got this, you can do this. I'm here to support you. And then to create this really lovely boundary of privacy, so they know that I'm not going to disrespect their privacy. I'm not going to exploit them in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of safety there.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I'm hearing also like there's a very open, honest communication channel between you and your boys, where even when they're going through stuff that's maybe uncomfortable or stuff that's a little bit out of the ordinary, they feel they can have that conversation with you because of the boundaries that you've set up, because of the conversations that you've had. Where I can remember growing up, and I know with a lot of people, it's almost like, don't want to tell mom or dad this because they're either going to flip out or like it's going to be weird or something like that. Where I
Or
think a lot of
punishment.
kids, what's that?
Or even punishment.
Mm, mm, yeah,
Yeah. When people
yeah,
feel uncomfortable or they feel fear, oftentimes their natural reaction is anger.
mm, mm,
And that could be really scary, and that does not breed trust and good open communication. And I prioritize, because I didn't have it growing up, I prioritize trust, honest communication, and emotional and physical safety in our home. And my
yeah,
kid, I'm so like, we're like this. My 14-year-old calls me, like, he's been at his dad's on their summer break for the past couple of weeks. He calls me like 4 or 5 times a day. He'll send me little like links to things that he finds that he thinks are so cool. And yeah, it's really sweet. I love it. I'm so grateful.
yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. One of the best teachers I learned from Dr. John DeMartini, he would say like your voids create your values. So like growing up, not having your own privacy, having yourself exploited, that obviously was a void for you when you were younger, but now that also instilled that value, how important that is. So like you said, you've done a lot of work around your mother, and normally the person, our biggest adversary, was normally also our biggest teacher as well. Like she instilled those gifts in you that
Yes.
you're now passing on. So it's kind of funny how that works. The person who caused us the most pain paradoxically also gave us the biggest blessing. And I feel like you've really landed in that place as well. You seem and throughout this conversation, you have such a great understanding of the masculine psyche at many different stages of development. And I know one of the things you formerly used to do was work as a dominatrix. So I'd be curious to hear some of your thoughts and experiences on that, like, because that's the male psyche in a very intimate, erotic setting. And yet there's so many energies present in that type of environment. I'm just curious, what were some of your general thoughts and feelings? Was it I don't know, even the clientele, was it kind of like high powered men? Was it kind of like men in marriages? I'm sure there was a variety, but what was some of the insights you got from it? Was it like, wow, I didn't know this about men, or they really needed their power, or they needed to have access to that monster? Like, Yeah, tell us a little bit about it. I'm curious.
Whew. So people
Mm,
keep telling me to write a book, and I will.
okay.
So I will totally write a book about all this memoirs of a Dom or whatever we're going to call it.
Mm,
So it's a lot to unpack. And I just want to
mm,
preface that becoming a dominatrix was one of the most powerful healing experiences and journeys of my life because um, it helped me heal the wound of being powerless. And it helped me really define and understand power dynamics. Because being an actual dominatrix, not just, somebody that's going to toy around with it, it's high levels of personal responsibility. You have to take 100% responsibility for the container that you create. You have to create a container as a dom, otherwise submission is not possible. And what's the point of them paying all this money and coming to you if they're not going to experience that deep nervous system reset of subspace, right? That's the whole point. That and liberation from shame, having a safe container to explore all parts of themselves, especially the darkest, most shameful parts of themselves that they cannot share with anyone else. So this was a journey for me as well, a very healing journey. I'm so grateful that I got to explore this and to the level that I did. Um, it became, for me, it merged very quickly into high priestess work, and it became a spiritual practice for me. I want to clarify that because there's a lot of misconceptions, and let's be real, there's a lot of untrained, unethical, low frequency people out there trying to do this work. And there's a difference between the real a real dominatrix and someone who is just playing a role of performative dominance. Performative dominance does not create submission. So, as far as clientele, it's a full spectrum. It's super high power men in positions of authority who have a great deal of responsibility. They are chronically in control. These are the alphas of the world. These are the CEOs. These are politicians. These are mercenaries. These are high ranking officers and officials. A lot of married men, a lot of conservative married men, all the way to a spectrum of um, just your most beta, sissified, gender confused, um, person that like literally, some of my clients, they'd have to save up all year just for one session, like opposite end of the spectrum. What this work really gave me was a deep understanding on the psychology of sexuality and trauma healing. Because there's so many case studies we could go into, but there became almost not even almost, what I noticed is with all the data I collected over those multiple decades of doing this work, there were patterns. There was a lot of pattern recognition. There were significant wounds that attracted particular behaviors. There were particular health issues, parasitic infections, um, uh, low testosterone, like all these things. There was a pattern to it that really fascinated me. That was really fun. I got to explore deeper into the mother wound and how this shows up in the BDSM cravings and desires. I also understood on some level that when my clients come to me, on some level, they're coming for reparenting. They're coming to reparent their inner child and to do it in a way that liberates the shame and creates the container. Now, I did things differently. I began becoming that dominatrix that saw the wound, identified the wound, and really focused on the therapeutic aspects. I wasn't trying to create lifelong submissives. I was actually trying to give them a solid avenue to heal from it. And so I actually saw a lot of okay, not a lot, excuse me. I saw dozens of my clients almost graduating out of certain cravings and behaviors, especially if they were self-destructive. I took it upon myself to be like, okay, we need to figure this out, because it's a totally different story for them to come to me desiring a good hard spanking or even a brutal whipping and torture session if they're coming from a place of wholeness and healing and integration. And this is just, they love the endorphin release. They love this particular avenue and experience, because we're nuanced individuals. Like we get to play on earth. I'm not into limiting people, but the difference between someone coming to me with a deep need to be denigrated and subjected to pain and humiliation from a place of wounding, I'm not going to enable that, and I'm not going to keep feeding that. That was something. So as before I was getting out of it, I noticed that almost all of my clients were becoming coaching clients. And I really resonated and gravitated towards taking the clients. Excuse me for a second. That's rude. Go. I can't talk while he's like chewing on himself. My big old American bulldog. Um, I, I gravitated towards the clients who genuinely wanted to heal. They genuinely wanted to improve their lives, because that resonated with me. There's plenty of DOMs out there that will destroy men's lives and enable their weakness. That wasn't me. And so I started attracting a very particular clientele. It worked for me. And then it was just a natural gravitation over to the coaching. And I love it. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, amazing. I was curious because obviously you've got this insight, like almost what probably very little therapists have, where they're talking to someone on a couch, but you're seeing a man in a very vulnerable place and he's sharing things he probably doesn't even share with his therapist. What's that experience like for you? Obviously, like you say, you take on this responsibility. But what did you like maybe notice about men? Like obviously you're seeing men walking around in the normal world, but then you've also seen men in these deep, intimate settings. Are you like, wow, men are just looking for love? Or it's like, oh, men have insecurities just like women? Or it's like, actually, men are so much more powerful and dominant than they appear to be? I'm sure there was like a few, but I don't know. How did that change your perspective on just men in general, that work that you did? Because it's so unique.
I don't know if it changed my perspective on men. It just really gave me deep insights. Um, Where to begin?
Yeah.
So what I learned, so the first major lesson that I nerded out on was nervous system regulation and why powerful men were seeking this experience. And I realized everyone needs a nervous system reset. And I think it was Mata Gabor. No, maybe not him. It was Peter Levine said something along the lines of, our optimal nervous system state is a state of surrender. I translate that into our with our vagus nerve. In order to be in ventral flow state, it requires a certain amount of submission to what is. We need to feel relaxed. We need to feel calm and restored. In order to get there, if you are in chronic in charge mode, is you really need a container and someone to guide you into that. Now, some people can get there through their spiritual practice. Some people can get there through guided meditation. But in order to get through all of those icky, sticky layers and that chronic monkey mind, a lot of people they can't just turn off their mind like that. Their entire nervous system and the pH of their bloodstream is pumping with all these chemicals of their day in, day out habits, right? They can't just switch it off. They come to a highly trained dominatrix who is capable of dominating even the most dominant men and with the most feminine ways. It's really fun. And to create a container where they can immediately shift out of that, whatever that is, that role, that performance, that duty, and they get to transform into something else and be held and sunk deep into subspace and submission. It's a nervous system reset. And what was really fun is I'd have to bring my clients back into their bodies and actually do somatic work before I could send them out on this, after their session, because they were out of their bodies for that whole time. They'd be high as a kite. They'd be walking into a wall. I had to do things to get them back into their body. We do that as part of aftercare after a nice, heavy, hard, or deep session. The aftercare is, integration, pulling them like they feel the care. There might be some first aid that needs to be applied, and then somatic practices to get them back into their body. They get their brain on point, and then I can send them out. And what most of my clients would report is that one session would keep them in a higher frequency or a ventral state for days, if not weeks on end. And then I'd usually know when it's crashed down again, because then that's when I'd hear from them again and they're ready for a reset. So
Wow.
it's a really powerful tool, especially for men who don't know how to let go, who don't get a break. A lot of these men, they don't really have peace in their home lives. They're not exactly happily married, but they're tolerantly married. But I think that's kind of the reality for a lot of men, is they don't know what's possible because they've never seen it, or they just don't know how to lead in that way. Some of them were absolutely happily married, but their wife had no interest in any of this. And let's be real, most women are not capable of even dominating themselves, let alone a man, right? It's not a common thing. So they would go to a professional, have that experience, have that reset, and then receive the benefits. If anything, I relate it most closely to an ice bath, because but with the ice bath, you have to dominate yourself and make yourself do it, right? Nobody is like immobilizing you and then putting you in this thing and then telling you to breathe and telling you all these things to do, right? Whereas a dominatrix, you come in, she's immediately in control. She has everything under control. And from the moment she begins to tell you and speak to you, a good dominatrix is beginning to put you into a trance and beginning to sink you down deep into subspace. There is a level of control and ownership and safety that, one, has to be there. Two, is incomparable to anything else. But from what I gather, it's very similar to the effects of an ice bath on the nervous system. The other thing that my work allowed me to do was really create safety for people in their most vulnerable states. There's a lot of taboo out there that has generated a great deal of shame in our culture, in the world. When this shame is not processed, when it isn't healed, when there's no space for that, it can wreak havoc. And I personally think that the reason we had so many of these serial killers in the 70s that we don't have now, right? Like our BTK guy. There's so many I can list. Almost all of them had severe autogynephilia. You look at their case records, you look at their psychological reports, they're laden with mother wounds. They all had cross-dressing fetishes, and they were into the bondage, they were into the torture, like all of these things. To me, that's an example of what happens when that internal shame and that wound doesn't have a safe place to express and move and heal and integrate. For me, I took it upon myself, like, providing this opportunity and this healing modality for certain people prevents all of that from happening. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't see it so much anymore, if at all, is because people can actually go to a professional and have these experiences, release that tension and those like overwhelming desires to experience these things. Because normally if you experience something that you're craving, you experience it enough, you kind of get it out of your system. I've noticed that for a lot of men. They didn't really need it so much once they got to play. And the other thing about it that is so crucial is it's so safe. Like, dominatrixes create safety for their clients, they're at least supposed to. There will be no threat of social humiliation. There's no threat of rejection, unless, of course, that's what the play is in that container. But I mean, out in the world, there's no worry whatsoever about any kind of sexually transmitted diseases or anything like that. A lot of these men, if they don't have this outlet, they will do the most crazy self-destructive things. They'll just go to a glory hole in some back alley and then get that out of their system for a moment. It's usually a very degrading, destructive experience. And then they bring that home to their wives. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, no, no, no. Doms, we handle all of that, you know, from the adult baby to the extreme masochist. And I have had the pleasure of knowing some highly, highly intelligent, highly skilled dominatrixes. A lot of us have a background in psychology. We take our work very seriously. These are powerful priestesses. They have deep love and respect for men. And that's kind of, you know, for anybody that's seeking this, if you want to experience this, make sure that your dom is solid. Her life is together. She has multiple containers, container of professionalism, container of appropriateness. Like, there's all these different things. Make sure that she interacts with other high level doms, that she has a good reputation, and make sure that she understands that this is therapeutic. Make sure that you feel genuinely cared for. Otherwise, that's not the person. Like, don't go there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's so interesting and fascinating to me because, like, once I went through like the pickup thing, and I learned a bunch about seduction there. Now I've got a fiance. We're getting married in a couple months, but it's like I still had this curiosity, and that's when I came across like Umropani's work, where I saw your interview with him, and again, my like general conception of BDSM, it's kind of like, oh, weird people, and they tie each other up and wear these like latex shit, and like when I actually started learning more about it, I'm like, wow, it's so much more energetic. It's so much more like releasing of emotions. And I'm like, this is nothing what I thought it was at all. And it's so cool to hear you in terms of the work that you've done, where it's also like helping men with those patterns of shame. And like, I don't know what would be a pattern. Like, is it a guy's like, oh, he thinks he's got a small cock or something, and then you help him through that? Or maybe he's scared of like his sexual desire, he doesn't own that. Or maybe he's walking around the world without like taking ownership and leading in his life, and like helping him in a scene with those kind of things. What would be some patterns that you would come across?
All of the above.
Mm,
All of the above. Well, when there's unresolved guilt, because guilt always seeks pain, when there's unresolved guilt and deep, heavy programming, then that person usually is going to be looking for a sadomasochistic experience. Um, they also could just be
so guilt,
chasing
like I'm
endorphins.
a bad boy, or I did something wrong, or like I didn't get the love from my parents, so that means I'm bad. And then they seek out a painful experience to almost like validate the guilt.
Yeah, it could be that. It could
Yeah.
originate from their childhood. It could also
Mhm.
originate from them being man whores and getting everything they want. Some men,
Interesting.
especially
Wow.
high-powered, successful men who had very easy lives, they often
Mm.
come for the challenge and they want to play a game that they cannot win. These are like my
Wow.
millionaire clients. My millionaire
Yeah.
clients and highly successful clients, they usually want to play a game they can't win because
Because
they're
they've
getting
always
away with
won at
too much.
everything at life.
And
Mhm.
especially with a femdom, because often they have treated women so horrifically, they get away with it over and over and over again. They come to us for the punishment and the
Wow.
oh, what's that word that I love? I'm spacing out on it.
Almost like a
Um,
balancing of the scales. Like, I've done all this
yeah,
harm to
for
women, now I need to
yeah,
equalize. Yeah.
for divine justice, retribution. That's the word. Come
Interesting.
to us
Yeah.
for retribution. And
Yeah.
it relieves the tension. It relieves the
Wow.
guilt. They feel like they've paid a
Mm.
penance,
Mm.
right? There's small penis humiliation is a big thing. This one, I try to get them into their masculine power and energy as much as possible, unless they are truly autogynephiles. And there is a significant difference between an autogynephile and someone who genuinely has gender dysphoria. And usually if someone
What's
is
an
coming,
autogynephile? Sorry, I don't know what that
oh,
means.
thank you for
Mm,
asking. I don't even know anymore. Like, are these mainstream words? They're such a part of my life. I've been
mm,
using this word for over a decade now. So, an autogynephile is a very common fetish. I mean, I think we're at like almost 25 to 30% of men can be affected by autogynephilia at any point in their lives. Um, what it is a sexual arousal at imagining themselves either as a woman, being treated as a woman, or looking like a woman. And I actually really related to this because growing up, I could be aroused at thinking about being a woman, but oftentimes I would fantasies and dreams, I would play the role of the male. So I kind of got it early on and catered to it throughout my early days as a dominatrix, and still like wanted to evolve it. But autogynephilia is also can be connected to hormone levels and parasites, etc. So it's really good to kind of look at what's really going on. But it's a place for a man to come and safely play in the role of the woman. The difference between gender dysphoria, true gender dysphoria, and autogynephilia is gender dysphoria is the desire to be the other gender despite any kind of trauma or, well, let's say it like this, despite any kind of sexual arousal. Like we've heard of the post-com clarity, right? So that's the game. Usually an autogynephile, after they come, they're done. They don't want to be dressed in panties and stockings anymore. They're done. They want to, they're, that was their experience. They had a great time and now they're ready to be a man again. Whereas gender dysphoria, like it doesn't have anything to do with sexuality or arousal as much as it does with, their internal identity. So it's very rare. Whereas autogynephilia is quite common. It's a common fetish. And it was fun to explore with that because there's a whole spectrum of that as well. And that is such a sticky, tricky place for men to explore because of all of our social conditionings and the taboo. So for a decade now, I've been calling myself a professional secret keeper because that's basically the role I played. And I'd be the only person that knew their secrets, and we'd act out what they needed to release and get out of their systems. And a lot of these men are married. They're terrified of their wives finding out. I've actually had a few hang up on me during like a video call where they were hiding in their closet playing dress up, and then they heard like the door or whatever, and they were like, click. There was no bye mistress or anything. They would like had to quickly fix the situation because their wife came home early. So there's a lot of deep shame in it too, and they're trying to protect themselves from being seen in that way, public humiliation. It would destroy relationships. So and then we have our men that come to a dominatrix solely because they crave prostate stimulation. They crave prostate orgasms. And I personally love teaching that to men. I want to give them that empowerment. I love teaching them how to speak to the women in their lives to ask for these things so that they don't have to feel like they have to change who they are in order to get their needs met. I mean, if God put a man's G spot in his rectum, or you don't even have to access it from the rectum. You can access it externally as well. Why do we have to create so much shame around it? Why don't we focus on education? We can liberate. We can liberate this idea around human sexuality. It doesn't have to be so taboo, specifically because until we do, men are going to be putting themselves in very dangerous situations in order to get this need met. So for a while there, I was just going to focus on launching a prostate orgasm course. And then I got tired of all the censorship and working in the taboo. So I was just taking a break. But that is something that I love teaching men how to do for themselves. It can be a very healthy practice. And I love helping them learn how to communicate their needs with their female partners in a way. It can be really shameful. It can be terrifying for them to ask for certain things. And then I also love to explore with them where these cravings come from, to really give them the power back in their lives so they can decide, is this coming from a healed, integrated place? Or is this coming from an unhealed wound and trauma that really needs more attention?
Interesting. Wow, fascinating. I love what you said there. I think you said like something keeper of secrets.
Yeah.
And one thing I just wrote down there was like no judgment. Like in order for men to feel safe revealing some of these most intimate things about them, like your permission field, I can already feel it, but it must be absolutely massive. I mean, I can just imagine some of the things men have come to you to share with you, and for you to just look them dead in the eye and say, okay, cool, this is how we're going to do it, or like talk them through that. I can imagine what a relief it must be for them to be with someone who has such a big permission field. But yeah, it's just like this whole conversation, the spectrum of your life from on the streets and the gangs to now like dealing with men's deepest, darkest secrets. It's like, talk about the full spectrum of the human experience. You've been on a wild ride.
I've lived in multiple worlds at the same time too.
Sure. Yeah.
There, so I understand like that aspect. I really deeply understand what people go through, and my clients, I really understood like what it's like living a double life. And in many respects, I had to hide a great deal of my life when I was younger from my parents, specifically my mother. And it's exhausting, it's draining. And yeah, I know what that looks and feels like. And I also know what it feels like to have that liberation of safety and authenticity, and to really get to explore the full spectrum of who you are. I mean, it enables us to go deep into places that might be too dark and scary to explore alone, usually are. We need that person that's there that can like pull us up out of that, and bring us back into the light and integrate and have it be a very soothing, healing experience. Um, yeah, it's been great. I I don't miss the work anymore because it was actually really hard work. I mean, it was so delightful and it was so fun, and I absolutely
Sounds
loved.
intense as well.
It can be intense, but I like that. I like, I loved edge play and doing hardcore things. There were some sessions where I'd have over 100 needles in my client, and oh, I love
Jeez.
it. I know. I like to play hard. What can I say? And it also really supported me. Like I had such a crazy, adventurous, intense experiences growing up, lots of adventure, lots of intensity. I rode that wave for so long. Now that I have such a grounded, stable life, I needed some kind of element of excitement, something that was continuously pushing me to grow and to curate solid integrity and personal responsibility. And it gave me a lot. It really did. And um, I hope we can get to the point in our human evolution where we are not so judgmental, where we understand that healing doesn't look the same for everybody. And especially those of us who had deep wounds and traumas and early unwanted sexual experiences, sometimes BDSM, healthy BDSM, is one of the most effective, expedited modalities for healing because we get to the core wound quickly.
Yeah, it's not just talking through your problems for hours. It's like straight into the energetics of where that blockage is, and yeah, being able to hopefully get in touch with it, heal it, release it from the system, whatever it may be. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow, what a wild ride and journey we've been on, Jerrica, over the last almost 2 hours now. I just want to leave you. Obviously, we'll plug all your information down below with links to your Facebook. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you? Tell us a little bit about what you're going on. I know you got this thing going on with moms. I know you also do some work with men. So yeah, tell us a bit where we can find you and what's going on in your world.
So I have a bit of a bone to pick with social media. I don't like it. I know that I need to stay engaged and whatnot, but that's actually not the best place to find me. I do have social media links. I'll make sure that you have them for people to check in. But I think the best way to get a hold of me is to send me an email at hello@themarscontract.com. Hello at the Mars, as the planet, contract I check my emails twice a day. I would love to hear from you. I would recommend also for anyone interested in my work to just go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter. I don't send them out very often, but when I do, they're chock full of all the juice. I would say that for right now. I'm really excited. So the Mars contract is still going to keep going. I'm just not going to focus on it much. I'm not going to market much. I'm tired of all the censorship. This is another reason why I so appreciate these opportunities, because we can go deep. We can talk about this real stuff and hopefully affect lives and get people's gears turning like, oh, wow, there's avenues and there's outlets for these kind of things. There's advocacy. Awesome. So I hope if this resonates with anyone, please spread the word. You don't have to go through these things and navigate them alone. You know, you have people like me and Daniel that just, you know, we're this is what we love to do. Okay, so Mars rising. So the next iteration of my work, I'm going to be focusing on prevention of all the things that my clients come to me. And let's be real, a lot of this originate in their home life from their mothers. So as a mother and as a single mother, I think it is my duty in life and my calling to start focusing on restoring. Well, maybe not even restoration. Maybe this is just a whole new evolution, but restoring a young boy's ability to really, really have a healthy mindset and vision of manhood, to be proud to be male, to know what that even means, and to have this guiding light in his life, this direction of, you know, I'm a man. I get to become a man. What does that look like? What do I need to do? How does that even come about? And to help mothers foster this, I have a free course. It's a totally free course. All moms have to do is sign up. It's launching next month. It's called The 12 Ways Mothers Emasculate Their Sons Without Meaning to. And it's a series of 12 videos that go deep into all the different things that we mothers most commonly do without thinking about it, with the best intentions behind it, that actually prevent our sons from becoming confident, competent, and masculine. And I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to blow minds, because a lot of this stuff women are just not aware of. And I think it'll also give them insight into all the different subtle and unconscious ways they're emasculating all the men in their lives. And I'm hoping that it wakes them up and it gets them excited about learning a new way. And then from there, in September, I'm going to be launching probably a course and a community for mothers to get the support they need, both single mothers and partnered mothers, on how to really raise confident, competent future men. And I get so excited about it. I love it.
I can see your face just lighting up and beaming, speaking about it. So amazing. Definitely check that out for the guys listening. Send this to your partners, send it to friends that you know that are women. Tell them to go check out and sign up to Jerrica's stuff so that you can get the free course she has coming out. It sounds absolutely amazing. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You're getting right to the root issue. So when a guy's in his early 20s, he doesn't have to worry about how to pick up a woman at a bar, because he's already learned to embody his masculinity in his household, and he'll never have to learn those things. So I like how you're getting right to the root of the problem. And yeah, I think your work is needed more now than ever in human history. So thank you so much for chatting to us. We'll put all your links and emails so people can find you. For all the guys listening in, I highly recommend checking out Jerica's work. Reach out to her for some coaching. You can hear her level of expertise, her mastery across so many different fields, and she will get to the root of the problem and help you overcome that. So Jerrica, thank you so much for your time. I know it's early morning there in Florida. I really appreciate you sharing your mastery with us, with our community. And yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was an honor. And I really appreciate this time. It's fun to talk about these topics. And I think you're absolutely right. The world is changing. We need to restore balance. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do that deep inner healing work. And the best part is we don't do it alone. We get to do it together. So
Yeah,
thank you
that's
for
kick-ass.
everything that you do. And
Yeah.
I'm so excited about all the future opportunities and collaborations. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. We'll wrap it there. We will see you guys in the next episode. Chat soon. Bye-bye.